Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Now and Then Wrestling podcast. I'm your host, Ben Jordan, along with Michael Vee and Nick Cutler, and this is our maiden voyage, our inaugural episode of the Now and Then Wrestling podcast. Excuse me. So, welcome, Michael.
Thank you. That fucking music. I love that music. That music it makes me want to drink like a gin and tonic and something
Right?
from
To
old
me, it
school
felt like
days. Yeah.
the old Philadelphia Spectrum shows.
Oh
When
yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
put on the
yeah,
Spectrum
yeah,
show. It had that
yeah.
vibe to me, and I was like, you know what? That's got the right
Absolutely.
vibe.
Yeah.
Nick, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Good, fantastic.
I know you've had a bit of an interesting morning, so I will I'll leave it at that. But I appreciate you coming and joining us here on this inaugural episode as well. So to just kind of give you guys a little bit of a idea of what we are going to be doing here on a Sunday afternoon basis, as we can, as schedules permit, and all those good things. We're going to do a little bit of first we're going to start the show with talking about some of like the newer stuff, the big stories that are going on in today's professional wrestling business, but then we'll quickly switch gears and then we'll be looking at the nostalgic rewind, if you will, the then of professional wrestling, what made all of us fans. I am 40 years old. I've been watching wrestling since 1986 at least, that I can remember. And so we're going to see stuff before our time, during our time, the stuff that was nostalgic and made us fans of professional wrestling. Those of you that have watched me on wrestling podcasts in the past know I am a fan of a lot of different genres of professional wrestling. Maybe my favorite is deathmatch wrestling. I don't know how much of that we're going to get into on this show, but I love
Nick's
like
favorite.
70s.
That's Nick's favorite.
Yeah,
I'm sure we'll
yeah,
talk
Nick.
about it.
Nick. I know
Nick
you
is,
love deathmatch.
Nick is bursting at the seams to talk about deathmatch wrestling. I'm positive.
But I want to go around the room and let each of you everybody kind of say what made them, what genres, what part of professional wrestling are you a fan of? Because maybe people don't really know, Michael. What's your wrestling background? What do you remember most, and what is your favorite stuff that you go back and watch now?
We're really lucky out here. I've noticed, especially talking to wrestling fans who've been watching a while. I mean, we got everything, so I watched everything. My dad was into everything. Shit, you talked about how old you are, and I'm not. Our age is close, but I am old enough to say I have been to an AWA show in my area. My fucking goodness. Yeah, which seemed like old ancient wrestling, even when I saw it at the age of 6 years old, because of Vern Gagne's interpretation of wrestling. But yes. I watched everything, man. Jim Crockett Promotions was probably, what reeled me in first and foremost. Just Ric Flair, the Road Warriors, all that shit. I mean, it was just when you're like 6 years old and you're watching, Ric Flair talk crazy shit, sunglasses on his face, hiding his coked out eyes and all that stuff. I mean, it just drew me in. WWF, even World Class, Mid-South, big Mid-South fan. But I mean, later on in life too, was just the access to, everything on videotape and then DVD, and, now everything's digital. I mean, I really got in heavy into Memphis wrestling, which is like the one thing we didn't get out here, which is, Memphis is great, Portland wrestling. I mean, I've pretty much watched anything that I can.
Territory wrestling is so much fun. Now, Nick, you're a bit younger than us, and obviously you approach wrestling from a different aspect because you are a professional wrestler yourself, which neither Michael or myself can say that we are. So you approach wrestling with maybe a different eye and a different way of looking at it. But tell us a little bit about your wrestling background. What got you into it? What your era, your prime era, if you will, of wrestling would be.
Well, I grew up during the Monday Night Wars. So WWF was what sucked me in. And then when I found out that there was another promotion that was on the same night at the same time, I was obviously doing what all the other kids were doing that were my age at the time, which was flipping back and forth between Raw and Nitro.
So what age are you at that point, Nick? What age are you in that?
I would have been, I watched my first episode of Raw when I remember the exact episode it was. It was the Raw after the Buried Alive pay-per-view that was in Indianapolis.
Okay.
And so it would have been October 1996. So I would have been 8 years old.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So I'm 16 at that time. So it's a much different perspective for me. So yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So I might not even, it's like, so you being 16, you might have actually been able to judge that from the point that we all judge it from now, where you know that it's a performance. Me at 8 years old, I'm thinking all this shit's real still. So I was just enamored by the show in general. I wasn't able to really judge what I was watching from a technical standpoint until I grew up and got into the business. So I do remember though that I watched for a good month and a half, and I just thought it was cool to watch.
Right.
And then after Survivor Series, when Bret Hart was back on the roster full time, and I saw Bret Hart wrestle for the first time, that was when I got really sucked in and thought to myself, okay, I want to do this. And
Wow.
so that was the kind of wrestling that made me want to do it. I like technical wrestlers. If you ask me what my top 5 favorite wrestlers are, it's Bret Hart, it's Shawn Michaels, it's Chris Benoit, it's Mr. Perfect, and it's the British Bulldog. Bulldog, not so much for the technical aspect. I just have a soft spot for him.
Sure, everyone's got that one. Mine.
Yeah,
mine
exactly.
exactly. Craig
Bulldog
Pittman.
Exactly.
Craig
Bulldog
Pittman
is my freaking guy that's just up there for no matter what. But that was what I got sucked into. And now looking at it from where I am now, with being not only a professional wrestler, but a bodybuilder too, I also have a soft spot for the guys that took care of themselves and look like amazing athletes, but aren't necessarily the greatest performers, like my Uncle Lex. So
there you go. Powers of Pain.
Yeah, the freaking warlord. The warlord. I am enamored by the warlord.
There's your
terrible. Well, I won't even say he's terrible, but very, very limited as far as what he can do.
There was a kind of guy that got booked at that time, and he definitely fit that role for sure.
Listen, if I'm in a pinch on the streets, there's nobody I want grabbing somebody in a front face lock and hitting him with a big forearm in the back more than the fucking warlord. Okay?
You're goddamn right. And that's why I think this is going to lead to a lot of great discussion, because we come from very different walks of professional wrestling life, if you will.
Yes.
And so that's why I think is going to lead to some great discussions moving forward. So I just wanted to let everybody kind of get a flavor of what each of us is all about, because the three of us, we always have wrestling discussions, whether it's on Facebook or in messages with each other. We're always talking about it, and I always thought it would be fun to do something with Michael watching matches together, and it would be fun to do something with Nick doing pay-per-view reviews. And I said, why don't we just do it all together, because we're all friends, and then we could talk about some stuff that's going on now. And we all agreed. And so here we are. So without further ado, it's the Now and Then Wrestling podcast. So I want to get right into it. The big story, of course, there's kind of like 2 big stories that I'm going to tie together, and I want to talk about these 2 stories in a little bit different way than a lot of the narrative that you've heard about it now. The first story is, of course, Ring of Honor messaging out, I think it was last week or 10 days ago, saying that at the first of the year, they're resetting the roster completely. They're letting everybody out of their contracts. They're going to take the entire first quarter of 2022 off and hope to come back with a reboot in April of 2022. Along with that, just a few days ago, WWE purges another 16 or 17 wrestlers from the NXT and main rosters, including some very big names like Karrion Kross and Scarlett, Keith Lee being a big one. And I think maybe the most shocking one for a lot of people is Nia Jax being a releases. But now how I want to tie these 2 stories together and ask you guys about it is, right now, there is a flood of talent on the independents. Got people that do not have television contracts with any of the 3 major television companies here in the States at this point. Those places can only have so many people. The independents are very much in flux because of the COVID restrictions and all that. So there's a lot of wrestlers and not a lot of spots. And so I want to ask you guys first, Michael, from your perspective, looking at it from the business aspect, what does the next few months look like if you're an independent wrestler? And then we'll get Nick's perspective as an independent wrestler.
It's tough to say. I mean, if we're moving into an area of less restrictions, I think it's good for them. I mean, for them at least. It might not be good for other indie talent that's already out there, because you got more people coming into the market. But I mean, with the way that indie wrestling's grown, and what people can pay now, and different ways that they can monetize, I mean, they should be able to, add guys and bring new guys in, new talent, freshen things up a bit, because indies need that too. So, I mean, you could be looking at a little bit more of a boom now with more guys like that out there, because they can't go everywhere. I mean, that's
sure.
And like, I'm hearing guys, things like, I'm sure you guys have heard it too, Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman going to Impact. Who the fuck wants to go to Impact Wrestling? Just go pay a fucking indie date and
right?
make some good money. And yeah, who the fuck wants to go to Impact Wrestling?
It doesn't make sense to me why anyone wants to go to Impact. How they're still around is astonishing. And the fact that they outlasted Ring of Honor is kind of astonishing to me too. Nick, I'll ask you from a wrestler's perspective. Michael kind of brought it up there, and I think it's an interesting thought. With all these guys that were on TV now flooding the indies, for the guys that were on the indies, a guy like that was in a very similar position to yourself a couple of years ago when you were in a different spot where you're trying to maybe get signed. I know that's not where you're at now in your life, but put yourself back in that time and think, what would it be like for a guy in your position, knowing that shit, now there's a flood of guys that have been on TV and have names that are going to make it that much harder for me to get on a show that I can get my name out there in a significant way.
A couple years ago, I'd be panicking because, like Mike pointed out, and like anybody who has an ounce of common sense should be able to see, there's only so many places to work right now, and those places can only afford so much money at this point because of the fact that most places still have limited capacity, so they're only able to sell so many tickets, and they're only able to get so much money in sponsorship, because I think that's what a lot of people aren't thinking about too. Places that might have had their shows paid for by sponsors are probably in a tough spot right now, because even if you are able to keep the sponsors, chances are they're not able to give you as much money as they were pre-COVID. The money situation now would be very different from the way it was in 2019. And so obviously these talents are going to do what they need to do to still be able to keep working, if that's what their desire to do, is to keep working on the indies. And so for someone like me, who 2 years ago was just busting my ass to try to get to House of Hardcore and get to Impact and get to all these other next level indies so I could get my name out there more, and for very, very little money for maybe a curtain jerk spot, and now I can't even curtain jerk at some of these places because there's someone else that's going to be able to do it who was just on TV. So for those guys that are trying to do that, they're in a pretty tough position at this point.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard to really grow. Yep. Go ahead.
Me at this point, I don't give a damn, because the places that I work at and that pay me are going to keep bringing me in no matter what. If anything, it's actually going to work out well for me, because a couple of the places that I work at are the not next level indies, but those ones that are ran by multiple financial backers. And so they only run maybe 2 or 3 shows a year, but they're big conventions and they always bring in names. And so now all these guys being on the indies, cool. Chances are I might end up in the ring with a few of them, which looks good on my resume.
Too, right? Yeah, exactly.
When you ask him, I thought to myself, he does not give a fuck. When you ask him, and it's just more opportunity to meet new people, make new connections, and things like that too. And you probably will be working them. So I mean, Nick is not worried about somebody stealing.
No, and I didn't figure he was. Yeah, I definitely didn't figure he was, but I knew that he could give a perspective of a guy that was in that position. So that's why I wanted to ask him that way.
Sure. Now, and there's going to be a lot of people like that too, that are going to be scared. They don't have, that don't have the experience level of Nick and haven't figured out a way to, Nick's the ultimate hustler, which is how you got to be when you're, when you're in that business still and in the mindset. And there's going to be a lot of young guys that are definitely going to be scared.
Every time there's a release.
Well, because they're going to be scared because all they have to offer is their bodies.
Yeah.
They have no leverage point.
Great point.
I used to get so frustrated because when I was at that point, I would be in a situation. So, okay, I remember one idea specifically in my mind right now. So for the longest time, I was trying to hang on Tommy Dreamer's dick. And because I had gotten initially booked at House of Hardcore because of Dave Hero. And then because Dreamer was working with him at his Blizzard Brawl show. So I got onto that House of Hardcore show. And then one of the promotions that I worked for in Fort Wayne partnered with him for their show. So I got onto another House of Hardcore show. And Dreamer liked me. But I'm like, hey, like, can I get on your shows on the East Coast? And he's like, oh, I try to just use my East Coast guys, blah, 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 yada, yada, giving me whatever lines he could give me.
Right.
And at that point, I was, like I said, I was in a different spot. So I'm like, well, I'll do what I can to just come up there. Like, don't even give me a set price like you did in Fort Wayne or like you did in Milwaukee. Just let me get up there and tell me I have a spot and I'll make it up there.
Right.
And he wouldn't do it. But then I would see, the one time I remember specifically was Sammy Callahan posting a Facebook status or a Twitter status or whatever about how Kurt Stallion, before he got signed, whatever the hell his name was in Cameron Grimes or whatever the fuck his name was in
No,
NXT.
that's a different guy, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Riding with him to a House of Hardcore show and then getting onto the show. And I'm just like, how the fuck, like, I'm spending all this money to look like a fucking star, to conduct myself like a fucking star, and I'm offering to be there, and he's telling me not to come, and then some dude tags along with him and gets on the show.
Yeah, that's.
But even those guys are going to be in the fucking...
I never understood Kurt Stallion on the Indies. I never understood how he got signed, and it was not surprising to me that they quickly looked at Kurt Stallion and went, "Why did we give you a contract? I don't get it."
Well, I'm noticing.
And I'm not shitting on him. I guess I am shitting on him, but
I think he's a fucking. I think he's a fucking wet rag, just from a personal standpoint, because I've had personal interactions with him, and he's the epitome of a fucking. I'm not going to say he's the epitome of a nerd in a bad way, but he literally. Okay, so one of the reasons why I don't like this guy is if you guys follow indie wrestling. I don't know if you remember the name the Carnies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Carrie Awful and Nick Iggy. So I was working with them at a St. Louis Anarchy show back when, I don't even know if they're still running anymore, but it was when they were running. And it was me and one of the Ring of Honor students are tagging against them. And the Ring of Honor student hadn't gotten there yet. So I just went over to him. I'm like, hey guys, we're working together. You guys are up. You got like a tag team finisher that you can hit me with? I'll go ahead and take the finish. And they're like, yeah, we have the Forced Canadian. And in my mind, I hear Canadian, so I already know I'm going to tell them no.
Right.
But to be nice, I'm like, okay, tell me about it. What do you mean, the Forced Canadian? And they're like, well, we take your partner and we put his head in your legs, and then we each grab a hold of your back and your head, and we flip you and we force you to give your partner a Canadian destroyer, and then we pin your partner.
Okay.
And I'm like, not really going to work for me, guys. Oh, well, why not? And I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking because it's phony as fuck. Right. But I didn't say that. I wanted to be polite. So I'm like, honestly, guys, I've never done a Canadian destroyer before. I have no angst to do so. And I'm not really cool with, like, head bumps like that. DDTs, sure, do a DDT. But like pile drivers, tombstones, stuff like that, I try to avoid it. The risk to benefit ratio is too high with that.
That's very smart on these small ass indie shows. That if you're out there and you're a young wrestler, listen to that advice. That is really good advice. There's no reason to risk yourself on these small indie shows in St. Louis. You take those bumps for AEW when you get those bookings.
So I'm like, what else you got? And they're like, well, we have the sandwich pile driver. So I hear
okay, we're in the same subject. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But, me being polite, I'm like, all right, well, tell me about it. And they're like, well, one of us picks you up like a tombstone. The other guy will pick up your partner like a regular pile driver. We come together and we sandwich you two together, and then we both drop down at the same time. And I'm like, that sounds fucking terrible. And I don't know whether or not I made myself clear, but I'm not really cool with those kind of bumps. And they got really fucking hot about it. Like the one guy was like, dude, I was trained by Dutch Mantel, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I don't really give a shit who you were trained by. If you paralyze me, you're not going to pay my medical bills for the rest of my life.
Right.
So no, I'm not going to do that. And Kurt Stallion is a friend of theirs. And apparently he caught wind of this and he literally blocked me on Twitter
Such
because he
petty.
said I wouldn't take a pile driver from Kerry Awful.
That's so stupid. It's so that's the petty bullshit that goes on in the Indies. So
Right?
I want to move on because there's a great story, a hilarious story in my mind that came out this week, and that was Sabu, ECW legend Sabu announced that he was going to retire from professional wrestling. I don't believe him.
Nope.
But B, he did say that he would come back, and what he would want his retirement match to be would be against Brock Lesnar. And I want to say, after hearing that, I'm so mad that we never saw Sabu versus Brock Lesnar at any point. Like you sounded some random SmackDown or something. But I really now, even today, I want to see 2021 Sabu against 2021 Brock Lesnar. So fucking bad. How about you guys?
Oh man! Oh Jesus Christ!
I love Sabu. Like Sabu is awesome, but like 2021 Sabu, not so much. But seriously,
Yeah.
like, in their primes, Sabu versus Brock Lesnar, that probably could have been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You know what it brings me back to? The Cena match. The Cena Sabu match that they had, that was it was really fucking good because it was different, and they're both two different guys, and Sabu was on that night, which always helps too. But when I heard about the Sabu Lesnar thing, I took this as maybe this might have been a cry for help. I think this is Sabu's like attempted suicide. Like this is how he wants to leave the world, is wrestling Brock Lesnar. Because something sounds like, can you imagine like them working out a match in the back and like Sabu pitching spots to Brock Lesnar? Like, what?
Like, no, you don't understand, Sabu. I'm going to German suplex you like 3 or 4 times. I'm going to pick you up and give you the F5 and we're going home. That's how.
Yeah. Brock's like, instead of that, how about I just catch you and throw you over my fucking head? Like that's pretty much how that entire conversation goes.
Did you see my match with Kofi? Have you seen my match with Kofi? We're going to do that. We're gonna do that.
Yes,
exactly. Yes.
To change the subject a little bit, if it is really the retirement and Sabu, his career is over. It's a pretty amazing career, and I know the WWE Hall of Fame doesn't mean anything really, and getting inducted into all. But if you were to start a legitimate Hall of Fame, Sabu is a legitimate Hall of Famer. And when I always say that, I know when Vito and I used to have this conversation, we would always define this by, could you tell the history of pro wrestling without mentioning this person?
No.
And by that criteria, Sabu is an absolute Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah, and it's not just, here's the thing, it's not just what he did or his style and all that. And you and I have talked about Sabu. I mean, like Sabu, after a while, got old to me because it was a lot of the same. And that's fine. But the way that he really changed the business, too, that people don't realize, or at least not enough people, he really is responsible for a lot of the growth in indie wrestling, even before ECW, because he was one of the first guys to start regularly getting flown around too. And I'm not talking about, an ex WWF or WCW guy, that people would do that at the time. But as far as being, wrestling in Japan and being based here in the indies, he was the first guy to really start getting flown around like that. And he did a lot more indie wrestling at that time too. As I'm sure, and Nick, Nick's boy, Al Snow, I mean, Sabu worked for him all the time when Al Snow was promoting even before he was in Smoky Mountain. I mean, Sabu was all over the place.
Yeah, Sabu is a huge name. ECW, obviously, he's probably the biggest name, maybe Taz and Sandman and Tommy Dreamer and Sabu. That's your Mount Rushmore of ECW, right? I mean, I don't know that there's any argument there. You can maybe argue Shane Douglas against one of them, but I don't really know. As far as characters and icons,
Shane Douglas's laugh is on the Mount Rushmore of ECW.
See, I never got Sabu. It's not to say that I don't like him. But the reason why I like him is more because I met him in person. I actually worked with him in Illinois. And
fuck, I gotta see that.
The match was it was a triple threat match.
I gotta see what you do against what Sabu does, because I know the styles are so fucking different that I gotta see that match.
Yeah.
Well, it was a triple threat match between me, Sabu, and Rough Crossing. So
maybe that's one of the. Maybe we'll watch that match one of these weeks.
I think it's up somewhere. I'd have to try to find it.
Right.
But word got out before the match was going on that the promoter didn't have any money. So
not the first time Sabu's
we have this match called, and then we find out about the money situation, and Sabu comes over to us. He's like, I'm sorry, guys, I can't work for free. And if this guy doesn't have my money, then I can't work. And we're like, oh, no, like, we understand. Me and Ruff were still going to go out there because we literally found out, like, maybe 20 or 30 minutes before we were supposed to go on. So literally we're standing behind the curtain while the music's playing for the match before us as it's ending. We're getting ready to walk out, and Sabu runs back up to us and he's like, hey guys, let's just go ahead and go out there and do the match as we called it. It's not the fans' fault that this guy's a fucking jackass, so I feel bad leaving. So let's just go out and still do it. And I was like, motherfucker, like, okay, good for you. And he ended up getting paid too. I guess the promoter, we all thought the promoter left and ditched everybody. Oh yeah, he did. Well, the promoter left right before our match. And so in our mind, we thought he wasn't coming back. Wow. But then right before the show got over with, he showed back up and 3 people got paid that night. Sabu, Congo Kong, and me, because I rode with Congo Kong. And it was literally, we got outside to the car and Kong's like, did you get your money? And I was like, no, I'm not worried about it. I figured I wasn't going to be one of the boys that got paid. And Kong got back out of the car, went back inside, brought out $50 more than what I was supposed to get paid.
Good. Congo Kong is such a good dude, man. Such a good dude.
Yeah.
I can't say enough good things about it. My Sabu story goes like this. Sabu at the gathering, fucked up on drugs, just fucking blitzed on drugs. And me, Vito, and Brandon are walking him around, and we're going to the drug bridge, which is you can kind of get what it is because it's a bridge where you can buy drugs at the gathering.
Of course.
And we're walking him around, and the juggalos obviously love Sabu, and this is height of juggalo gathering Sabu's popularity. And we're going around and everybody, Sabu, 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 do the point, do the point, do the point. And he's so fucked up that Vito had to kept nudging him, going, Vito, hey, they want you to do the point. And he would just, he just do the point all fucked up. And people were just feeding him drugs, free drugs. That's my favorite memory of Sabu. So there you go. So that's a little bit of some of the stories that have been going on now. Now I want to switch gears and I want to talk about then. And so I'll turn this over to you, Nick, because the next segment is going to be, I'm going to lead this with anybody that's followed you on social media for the last few years. You do a lot of pay-per-view reviews from WCW, basically WWE Network pay-per-views. You do random reviews of those pay-per-views, and they're fun, they're entertaining, and Michael and I are always tagged in them, and we're always joining in the conversation. So I thought it would be fun to kind of bring that to this show here and kind of have that same sort of discussion between the three of us. And so I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us why you chose this pay-per-view and what pay-per-view it is, and you kind of lead the discussion on this.
Well, the pay-per-view for this show is Bad Blood 2004, which 2004 is probably my third favorite year in
Interesting.
2003, 2004 are like tied for my second favorite year in wrestling. 1997 is my favorite, but I loved 2003 and 2004 because that was when I got back into watching it after kind of being on a hiatus. So for those 2 years, every Monday and Friday, whatever SmackDown was on that week, I was watching SmackDown and I was watching Raw every week. And buying the pay-per-views on VHS when they would come out because I was too cheap to buy a DVD player.
Right.
But right now I'm watching all of the 2004 Raw, SmackDown pay-per-views, the shows, just reliving the year. And that was my next pay-per-view that I had up in line. Okay. So I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be the easiest pay-per-view to do because I'm getting ready to watch it anyway. So let's just go ahead and do this one.
So set the scene for me. So like, what are the big things? If you've been watching it, what are some of the big things that have been going on in this time frame? So maybe refresh some people's memories of what's going on at this point.
So if we look at the actual card for the pay-per-view, I have it pulled up here. 1 second.
I know, Michael, you did a little bit of investigating into this too. You watched the TV prior, so maybe you can fill us in a little bit on what's going on too.
Yeah, I watched a few weeks of Raw, and man, I'm not as down on Triple H as some people are. And I'm like,
I love Triple H.
I love him in the ring too, but I mean just as like somebody who's constantly being pushed or pushing himself. And in this time frame, he's fucking run amok, man. I mean, he's all over.
He run amok.
He is. It's like Shelton.
You're right, because it plays out in the main event of this pay-per-view.
Exactly,
yes.
And that's the thing is that there's
Jesus
so much.
Christ.
There's so much shit going on at this time. Like they're trying to push Shelton Benjamin. They're trying to make Benoit a credible champion. They're trying to get Eugene started. And it's like these guys are, I agree on that too. But this is like the direction they're going, and it's like three very, important things. But it doesn't matter because everything comes back to Triple H and Shawn for like the 900th fucking time by that. And of course he's got to go over too. It's just like,
indeed.
It's pretty bad.
So let's take it match by match because I've got notes. I took notes, ladies and gentlemen. I watched this pay-per-view yesterday morning, and I took notes along the way. The first match is the tag team championship match.
Whoa.
Right?
You didn't find the dark match?
I didn't. I just played what was on
Peacock. Fuck, I want to see that dark match so bad.
What's the dark match?
Ben, the dark match is Batista versus Maven.
I want to see that so bad.
See, okay,
I
was going to talk about this later, but
dark match.
It's worth talking about now. Seeing Batista with hair is fucking weird. But weird.
I love it.
I don't know what it looks like. He's wearing a wig. It's weird.
I loved the Batista with hair.
Oh, it looks so weird.
When you're Batista, you can do whatever the fuck you want. So.
Sure, I guess.
You can.
But
here's the thing, too. He was even more of an animal back then because this is pre-tricep tear when he was over 300 pounds. Once he tore his tricep, he downsized because for those of you that aren't familiar with anatomy, you can grow your muscle tissue, but you can't grow your joints and tendons. And they can only take so much before they break, which is why when you see guys the size of Batista, he gets thrown into a cage and tears his tricep, barely doing anything. And so I'm wanting to say he was 317 pounds pre-tricep tear. And when he came back and going forward after that, he was noticeably leaner at 290. Yeah. So he lost 30 pounds and kept it off. And if you notice, he never really got hurt again after that.
I was surprised when I saw him come out in the main event, at the end of the main event. I was like, wait a minute. He wasn't on that show? Like, how did that happen? But now it makes sense that he was in the dark match. So the first match of the pay-per-view is the tag title match. La Resistance, Sylvain Grenier, I don't know if I even said that right, and his partner Rob Conway taking on Chris Benoit and Edge. Chris Benoit is the world champion and is going to wrestle 2 matches tonight, including this tag match here. My only note, I had a couple of notes from this match. The first thing I noted was I liked La Resistance better when they were the Rougeau brothers.
Yeah, that's a fair comparison.
I just like the Rougeau brothers were better. I know, you mentioned in our chat, Nick, that you thought they were kind of underrated. I never got it. I thought it was a cheap heat gimmick from 2 guys that kind of look good, and could kind of work, but there was nothing special about either of them.
Let's rewind. We're saying 2 guys. At one point, there was 3.
Yes.
So Rene Dupree as part of La Resistance was phenomenal. And I thought the story of how they brought Rob Conway into the group and how he was a French sympathizer, because you had that was the thing. You had those kinds of people at the time. There was like a very anti-French movement at that point because they didn't want to help with the war in Iraq. They were kind of trying to stay neutral or whatever. Right. And so there was a very strong, well, what the hell? Why aren't you helping us? Yada, yada, yada movement at that point. And so I feel like nowadays those would probably be the baby faces. France would be the babyface at that
It just
point.
rang very Nikolai Volkov, Iron Sheik, cheap heat to me. I didn't get it. I don't like it.
Well, there's a problem. This is an era where Vince goes like really wraps himself in the flag after 9/11. Like there's a 3-4 year period where you get Minoru Suzuki comes in, and he's doing the Japanese emperor gimmick at first, like from
Kenzo
the World
Suzuki.
War. Kenzo. Sorry, Kenzo. Yeah, Kenzo coming in.
It would have been way better if it was Minoru.
And we're about
first of all,
5 months.
You can kick me off the podcast for
Muhammad Hassan too.
No. It's Muhammad Hassan. It's Rene Dupree, who even after he splits is kind of doing something. You have La Resistance. You have Suzuki coming in. I mean, Vince and the Un-Americans were about a year after that. Like between 2002, 2005, Vince is going really heavy with like nationalistic stuff because of 9/11. You could see it.
I do have one more note which goes right along these lines. There's a moment in the match. It's probably in the very early part of the match where they're just kind of each team's feeling each other out. There's a segment of the crowd that starts doing a USA chant, and it lasts for about 3 or 4 seconds till they realize, and the crowd obviously, no one in the match is fucking American.
Yeah, nobody.
By storyline or reality, the baby faces are both Canadian. Sylvain Grenier is French, and Conway is American, but he's not. He's a French sympathizer. He's an anti.
They're not chanting for him.
It reminds me
one of those things where like wrestling crowds.
It reminds me of when WrestleMania was in freaking Toronto and Duggan is chanting USA and Jesse Ventura calls him. What's this idiot doing? He's in
Exactly. But it speaks to wrestling crowds being so programmed sometimes where there's anti-American to chant USA. And it was funny, like the segment of this crowd thought it was a good idea, and then they quickly realized, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense for us to do this.
They do it with Bret Hart all the time too. Bret Hart.
Otherwise, it was a good match that was ruined by Kane coming out and fucking the finish, which obviously was just to get us to the match, which was later, which is Benoit defending against Kane.
But even then, the finish came off really weird because like his flames shot out, but there was no music. And
Benoit doesn't break his hold. So Grenier is in the crippler crossface for more time than anyone in the history of the business. No one has held on. No one has held on in the crippler crossface and not tapped out longer than Sylvain Grenier in this match. It's really bad.
It came off very sloppy, and I understand what they were trying to do, but it didn't come off well at all.
Even what they were trying to do, it's a finish from like a different era where it would actually get a heel heat. Right. But even in 04, it's not 2021, but even in 04, everybody's kind of in on it enough to where it's like, you're just not giving us a fucking finish. Like it gets the promotion heat instead of getting Kane heat. It's like, this is lame. Like you really couldn't beat fucking La Resistance in the goddamn opener with your world champion wrestling in the fucking match. Like, come on.
Right.
We must protect Sylvain.
If you look at it as them like trying to give Kane, like get Kane heat. Why does Kane need that heat? Kane is Kane at that point. So he already had enough heat. And it's like
it's overbooked nonsense.
Yes.
If we're looking at it from a wrestling's real standpoint, Kane is 7 feet tall, 300 pounds. Why does he need to weaken a guy that's 5'8", 200 pounds?
Right. It doesn't make sense. You're right. So the next match is Tomko and Jericho, right?
Yes.
So for me, my notes on this were, first of all, there's a moment very early on because Trish is Tomko's manager. And Trish is standing in front of the announce booth on that side of the ring. And the camera kind of shows her standing at ringside. And for a hot minute, Lawler and Ross are talking so uncomfortably creepy about how hot Trish Stratus is. And it's instantly thought like, shit that would never fly in 2021 for 500, Alex. Like there's no way they could get away with that kind of shit. Like sexually objectifying Trish Stratus weekly at this point is what's got to be going on.
Oh yeah, sexually objectifying all the divas.
Yeah, we'll get into that more when we talk about the women's match because I do have some points there as well. I will say this: my note otherwise was that they didn't waste my time. But the finish again, we're going to talk about finishes, I think, a lot here because
a weak ass Enziguri.
A transition spot. Yeah, they used the transition spot as the finish.
Has Jericho ever won a match ever with an enziguri? I was very like, what the fuck?
He did. He won against Christian and Trish in the handicap match at Backlash with the enziguri.
Okay, well, at least he was establishing it. Maybe he was trying to establish it as a finisher. He obviously was like very soon after that must have been like, all right, we're gonna go with the code breaker deal for the bigger guys. I don't know.
I don't even think he used the code breaker until he came back in 2007.
Correct.
Yeah.
But
okay,
here's
so
the
there
thing:
you go. He was maybe looking for something like that because obviously he can't.
Well,
I don't know.
And it's been forever since I watched this. So in my mind, I'm thinking I saw him hit the enziguri. I'm like, okay, enziguri, he'll hit the lion salt, and like that'll be the finish.
Right?
No, just covers him and pins him, and I'm like,
it was weird.
Number one, that move looked weak, which made Tomko look fucking stupid. And this is Tomko's first match for the company. Up to that point, he had just been managing.
Oh no.
Secondly, I don't feel like Jericho needed to win at this point. Like Christian
could have had Trish fuck him, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Christian's gone at this point. So all you have is Trish and Tomko for that little pair right there. Why wouldn't you let this big man, even if it's dirty, beat Jericho? Because let's be honest, at this point, Jericho's on his downward spiral. He has that one little bump in 2005 where he's working with Cena, but not too long after that, he's gone. So at this point, his role should have been to elevate Tomko, which he did. Like, Tomko looked like $1 million in this match. And
match.
He really did.
I'm fairly certain Tomko is not $1 million. But I would have felt more vindicated for the match if Tomko would have gotten the win.
I agree.
I saw the TV where he debuted Tomko, and he gives Jericho a bicycle kick and fell right on his ass.
There you go.
Yeah, he did.
So you're right. It's those kind of moments where Vince is in the back going, nope.
Yeah, that's probably. But watching Jericho, who I have always liked anyway, just watching him carry him to that level of match was like, damn, this is pretty good, especially for a debut pay-per-view match for a guy that hasn't been doing it that long. Solid stuff. It
was the only match on the entire card where I didn't feel like it was too long. Every other match I felt was like at least a few minutes too long. Yeah. That match was like, okay, you didn't waste my time. You got in and out. You told a little good story. Fine. Perfect.
The crowd, because it wasn't too long, the crowd was into it throughout too.
Exactly. So that moves us along. Randy Orton cuts a promo, which is fantastic.
It is.
Where it starts out in the back. It starts out in the back, and he does this thing where he's brilliant in that there's not even really a lot of boos, but he plays like there's a lot of boos, which then gets the crowd to start booing him, right? And because he plays this thing where like he hears the crowd booing him, and he's like, so he grabs the mic and he goes out amongst the crowd and he starts barking at the crowd and cutting promo on the crowd. And he gets in the ring and he's cutting a promo, and then Shelton Benjamin comes out, and I'm like, all right, here we go. And Shelton Benjamin cuts maybe one of the worst promos I've ever seen in my entire life. No emotion whatsoever being shown by Shelton.
Do you ever shut up?
He had emotion, but it was all forced. Like it came across like so badly acted. Yeah, it was like, hey, you, what are you doing? What are you going to do to me if I say something to you right now? And they were trying. This was like when they actually tried with Shelton Benjamin. And they really do book him like shit at different times, so the crowd's not responding. But then when you watch this, it's like, fuck, it's really hard to justify, like them moving away from him was the right call because he did not. And it starts off.
But then they went back. But then they end up going back. That's the thing. Like, has anybody gotten more chances to break through than Shelton Benjamin? That's what I was thinking when I was watching this. Because as I'm watching this, I'm thinking that I just saw them put him over Triple H twice on Raw.
Yeah.
They put him over Ric Flair on pay-per-view.
On pay-per-view, yeah.
He's beaten Randy Orton twice on Raw. And then the only reason why they move away from him is because he gets injured. And then right when he comes back, he's beating Jericho for the Intercontinental title.
Yeah, they loved him because he's so athletic. Like in the ring, you could see like, man, this guy's he could be a great baby face, but he has no charisma at all. He's completely void of charisma. And they never thought, get this guy a manager. Get him a hot chick.
The funny thing about this match,
Shelton's mama.
The That was fun for what it was, though. Like it was fine for what it was.
No,
like
I laughed my ass off
that's
at
the
her
thing.
stuff, and then she's a stand-up comedian,
Yes,
and I met her on a
Thea.
cruise.
Yeah,
She
Thea.
was doing the comedy club on a carnival ship that I was on, so I actually got
That's
to
funny.
meet her and talk to her about when she was in the business.
She had a
She
show.
hates Vince McMahon, by the way.
Oh, I'm not big,
Not surprising
big
at all.
there. Yeah,
the match, of course, is very good, but I wrote the match was 8 minutes too long. Like they again, because but I think it's because of what you were saying. They're pushing Shelton Benjamin, and they're doing that thing where they're like, well, if you just give him more time, even though he loses, he still gets over. And it was like, that's not what happened. Randy Orton was clearly the better guy. There was never any threat that Randy Orton was going to lose that match, especially considering he had just come off ending Mick Foley's career. He's in the middle of this legend killer gimmick. This is not in line with that gimmick at all. So you knew he was just going to go through him. But everything about Randy Orton to me, I didn't give him enough credit before.
I know, because you sent that message in the group where you said that Randy Orton has to be top 15 of all time. And I instantly in my mind was thinking of you and Vito going on about how he was terrible and he never did anything new and this and this and that and that. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is different from when he and Vito used to talk
with
about
a new eye looking back. Like, again, because now put me back in 2004. 2004, I'm on the road with Vito and Sal and Brandon, and we're driving all over the country. I'm not watching Raw. We're in a different mindset of what's cool about wrestling. Yeah. So at that point, we are all about, like, Randy Orton is garbage because he's WWE personified. Like, he's trained by WWE. He's just WWE personified. So I never gave him that much credit. I'm telling you, I watched from the promo to the match to everything about him. You could just see there was no doubt Randy Orton was going to be a gigantic star. He had everything. His promos were great. He has the look. His character was good, and his character wasn't forced. His character was an extension of his real dickish self, which made it that much easier for him to be good at it. I mean, everything about Randy Orton. And I was like, man, he's top 20. I mean, I top 20 for sure. And I'm like, I think he's top 15. I think the total package, maybe if we put a list together, maybe one of these weeks we'll put together a top 15 list, and maybe there's some arguments down at 12 to 15 that maybe he's not on that list, but damn, he's close because fuck is he good. And still to this day, you go to a house show and watch Randy Orton. I took my kids to a house show a couple of years ago here in town. Randy Orton is a fun house show watch. The crowd loves him. He knows how to work the crowd. Like, he is a pro's pro when it comes to professional wrestling.
He is.
One of the house shows I went to when WWE still ran Valpo University, so it was 40 minutes from my house. The main event was him and John Cena in 2006. So it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Orton just freaking, yeah. Orton was my favorite for a while. So
we move ahead. Now there's a women's four-way. It's Gail Kim, champion Victoria, Trish, and Lita in a four-way. And
now this was literally made a four-way the 7 days prior. It was supposed to be just Gail, Kim, and Victoria. And then they threw Trish and Lita into it at the last minute and made it a four-way.
And you could see why, because that match needed to start. For me, I first thought Gail Kim is so small. Like,
oh yeah,
she is fucking tiny. And I never really thought about how tiny she was before. But like, I look at her and I look at Dakota Kai, and I'm like, they're not believable because I don't believe they can even beat up other women. I just don't believe that they are big enough. They don't look intimidating enough or strong enough or athletic enough or anything enough to beat up any other woman. I just never believed it. That was my initial thought. I was like, I'm initially dismissing Gail Kim because she's too small.
It depends though, because when she worked Kong, she used that to her advantage. Like the small big thing actually worked.
Even when you watch this match, there's a point where I think it's Trish like smacks her in the face, and Trish like whiffs her fucking smack, and then you just hear, and Gail just smacks the fucking
shit out of her. Yeah.
And I was like, holy shit.
The crowd did not respond to when Trish did it at all. And then when Gail does it, it was just like the whole crowd is like, oh my God. I mean, like, you could just hear them, ooh, everybody. It was like the Jerry.
Holy shit, she really got her.
Yeah. But I thought I thought the match was fine. It actually made sense to do it the way they did it instead of singles, because it's just everybody's hitting their moves. which in this era is, hey, they're hitting shit and they're not missing shit. And for the women's division, I mean, it's different
At
now.
this point,
then,
I looked at it and I went, man, this
yes.
is as good as what the girls now are doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That
and it was
everybody's
perfect
good as
length
what the
too.
girls
I'm
now are
looking at
doing.
the length right now. It was 4 minutes and 43
Yep.
seconds long.
Yeah,
And they didn't waste
And
any
so-
time there either.
No.
Yeah, I will say that. Yeah.
It went. It was like boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
High spot, high spot, high spot, high spot. Finish.
Yep.
I going back, just examining each of them one by one. Number one, moving away from the work. Trish has never looked better than in 2004.
Yeah,
Like
she's
they
pretty-
did a
she's done,
great job
Mhm.
of taking her babyface persona and just making it a dislikable, full of herself, hot chick. Like,
Mhm.
because what would you hate a woman for when she's hot? You would hate her because she knows that she's hot.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what they did with Trish. I always liked Gail Kim. I always thought that she was underrated, and I always liked Victoria too. I've never been sold on Lita ever.
Me neither.
And don't get me wrong.
See, for
she
me,
got the
when I was watching her, she works like a man. She works that. I think that's what I like. She doesn't work like a girl. She throws punches.
and that's
like
why
a
she
man.
got over.
Yeah.
She was doing moonsaults. She was doing flying head scissors. She was doing. But for me, I see so much of her stuff look sloppy and dangerous.
Sure, there's that element. She's very indie in that. Yes.
She's
Yes.
The music between the notes really
Yes.
fucking sucks. Like she
Mhm.
throws some very shitty forearms, and it's things like that where it's like, I hate me personally, and it's, you know, like, and you guys know this. When you're watching shit with like a bunch of wrestlers a lot, it's, you know, you start picking up what they're looking at. And like, that's what wrestlers, at least the ones that I've been around, are looking at the most is like, does your shit look good in between? Not just does your fucking move look good, but like everything in between. And it just seems like she just kind of lazily throws out shit so that she can hit the next spot. I've never been a big fan.
I agree with you there. Going back to the Victoria, I did remind to note that Victoria trying to be sexy is awkward. That's not her. Like she's shaking her ass and stuff. And it's like it's
well,
it's
Lisa is a very sexy woman when she doesn't try.
Right.
She didn't need to try. When she was a heel and she just came out as like the crazy psycho bitch, she was sexy. But then they make her a baby face, and I'm sure Vince's like, well, go out there and shake your ass.
And it's an act.
That's not her.
Yeah, it comes off as an act. Exactly. It's not real.
Exactly. Yep. So let's move on, because I think this is going to be where we have our biggest discussion. And I know I want to keep this moving because I don't want to keep us here all day.
Did Lex Luger wrestle on the show? I'm sorry.
No, we're going to eventually watch a show with Lex Luger. We'll get into that discussion. But I think we're going to have a fiery discussion about this, because based on what you guys said a little bit earlier, I fucking love Eugene. I love everything about it. I think it was executed perfectly, and I think that there is zero chance that gimmick would ever get over in any other era ever. But I think that Nick Dinsmore did the absolute best with that gimmick, and I think it had a real chance to get over with him befriending and learning moves from all the stars. And like him, I'm telling you, like everything about it, I know that you can't make fun of mentally disabled people, right? And that's what they were kind of doing. Like they were towing that line of, they were making fun of him until he got in the ring, and then when he got in the ring, he was fucking awesome, which is a great story to tell. I think it's very original. I think it's ballsy that they went for it, and it was executed perfectly, in my opinion. I really loved it. I think Nick Dinsmore's performance as Eugene is timeless. I think you can't ask somebody to perform a character as difficult as that one better than that was done. I really enjoyed it.
I think he did it really, really well. And the gimmick worked for what they were doing. It's just so much. Like, and I was listening to JR and Conrad do the review of Vengeance 2004, and JR brought up the same thing. He's like, I'm not saying that it didn't work, and I'm not saying that Dinsmore did not take chicken shit and turn it into chicken salad, but it was so overdone. He's in every single segment, and he's in every single breakdown, and it's just like less is more with him. Especially
they got too much of a good thing, and they're like, oh, let's just shove it all down everybody's throat. And it's like, that's not the character you can do that with.
No, and the match went too long because it's like it was too much of it, to your guys' point. To me, like what they could have probably did with it, just say it would have been a lesser version, but it probably would have worked better, is like a Rick Steiner varsity club type thing.
Kind of,
like
sure.
where he's he's slow, he's being picked on, but he's still like a totally believable badass. Like if you go back and watch Starrcade 88 and watch Rick Steiner win the TV title for Mike Rotunda, the crowd pop is fucking insane.
The crowd loves him. I'm telling you, there was an opportunity. They could have put the world title on Eugene. There was a time and then a way.
Well, there is a Raw. It's I believe it's the Raw after Vengeance where Benoit and Eugene wrestle, and Eugene hits a rock bottom, and the ref counts the 3, but Benoit has his foot on the rope. But the pop when the crowd thought that Eugene actually won the title was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Insane.
So
I liken it to the false title win in 99.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing.
The false title win in 99 when Jericho, quote unquote, won the title from Triple H.
That was 2000.
That's how loud this crowd reacted when they thought Eugene won the title.
That was insane. Yeah.
I did another note I had here was watching Eugene. I thought to myself, Colt Cabana is Eugene without the hint of mental disability.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the same guy where you're like, that guy can't wrestle, and then he gets in there and you're like, whoa, holy shit, he does all kinds of really cool wrestling shit.
Well, I've worked with
and Dinsmore did a great job of mixing the comedy in a way that Colt Cabana really took that and took the mental disability stuff out of it and said, wait, there's still a way to wrestle like that and make it your own in a way and mix comedy into wrestling when no one else was doing comedy and wrestling at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So
I worked with Dinsmore and I worked with Cabana, and they both literally calling a match with both of them was like calling it with the same person.
Yeah,
so
I bet that makes so I'm on to something there.
Yes.
Garrison Cade comes out and gets involved in this match. I was like, oh shit, Garrison Cade. And he takes the worst stunner ever in this match.
He fucked up that stunner so bad.
They split up Cade and Jindrak, sent Jindrak over to SmackDown, and kept Cade on Raw. And they were half-assed trying to elevate them both because
you can see because he looks like a guy that they would push. Garrison Cade looks like a guy who could be a star, and then he wrestles, and you're like, "Oh no!"
He fucked that stunner.
So, but back before I knew that Rudy Gonzalez was a piece of shit, I was talking to him one day because he runs Shawn Michaels' old school, and Shawn had visited one day, and Rudy's like, "I want you to take a look at a couple of people." And they're like, okay. And it was Garrison Cade and it was Daniel Bryan. And they're like, Rudy's like, I know Daniel's small, but he can really, really go. He has personality. If you could just bring it out of him, he's technically sound, this and this and that and that. And Shawn's just like, yeah, they're interested in Cade.
Yeah, you can see why you if you're going to send in pictures of those two guys, especially at that point, it's not even a question who's going to get signed there. But Garrison Cade sucks, and I'll just leave it at that. I don't think we need to discuss Garrison Cade anymore at this point. The next match is the Benoit Kane World Title match. I didn't even give any notes because I care about Kane that much. I hate Kane so much. If you've seen one Kane match, you've seen every Kane match. Every Kane with the fucking top rope clothesline and the fucking boot in the corner. And you've seen every spot. You know me, guys. I'm out on Kane. I'm out. If he's not wrestling,
but isn't that fair for anybody? Isn't that fair for anybody?
It is fair, but it is my grudge against Kane, and I don't give a shit.
Ric Flair was still trying to flip over the fucking corner at like 60 years old. Okay,
but he still changed it up a little bit. Kane never changed his moveset in 15 to 20 years ever.
But he changed his personality. Because don't get me wrong, I see what you're saying where you got tired of watching him. Because like you, I loved the initial Kane run. Kane debuting at Bad Blood through WrestleMania 14 was fantastic to me.
Great stuff.
And then I'm like, okay, not really liking him anymore. They turned him babyface and tagged him with X-Pac for a while. And I'm like, yeah, that's still not doing it for me.
Here's the thing. He was another in a line of Undertaker opponents, right? Like Undertaker had a series of opponents where it was big guys that looked like they might be able to beat him. He'd overcome them, and then those guys disappear. But then they liked Kane, right? They like Glenn Jacobs as a guy, right? They like having him on the roster. He's a good guy. He's not going to fuck around. He's going to show up every day. So you keep him on. But that was the problem, is like once you're done with Undertaker, what do you do with a giant monster that can't beat the Undertaker? Like, what's the point of him at that point? And so you're putting him with X-Pac. You're taking his mask off. You're doing all
okay, right there.
That was when I got reinvested. You like Glenn Jacobs, but the character Kane after Undertaker had never found a true direction ever. In my
the character, okay, I challenge you to go back and watch his matches with Shane McMahon.
Okay, what years is that?
That's a hell of a challenge.
2003. He had a last match
because you're really asking me to do something.
SummerSlam 03, they have a match, right?
No, SummerSlam 03 was Kane and RVD.
Oh, you're right.
Okay,
Unforgiven 2003, it was Shane and Kane in the last man standing match.
Yeah.
And then Survivor Series 2003, it was Kane and Shane in the ambulance match. But when Kane took his mask off in 2003, that was when I was like, okay, I'm into this motherfucker again.
Really?
Because he was tying Shane McMahon to the ring post and electrocuting his testicles with freaking car batteries. And he's tombstoning Linda McMahon on the stairs, and he's lighting JR on fire. And I'm like, this guy is freaking fantastic. I love it.
I can get it. You're in a different spot than I'm at that point, so I could totally understand that. I don't want to spend not because I don't want to, but I want to keep us moving because we got to talk a lot about this main event match because it's 46 minutes long.
Oh my fucking
God.
And it's Hell in the Cell, Triple H and Shawn Michaels. And I'm telling you, it was 46 minutes long. I enjoyed all 46 minutes of it. I'm not sure, however, how much the crowd enjoyed all 46 minutes of it.
It was too fucking long.
It was too long.
Yeah, way too fucking long.
And I think another big problem with the match was the Hell in the Cell itself. The fans were disconnected from the emotion and the drama of the near falls and the blood and everything because they were looking through that cage. I really believe because the crowd was very disconnected. There was a lot of really cool near falls, in the middle of that match where they should have gotten a huge crowd reaction. I was kind of surprised that there was almost no reaction from the crowd.
But here's probably why too. We're watching it in a vacuum now.
In a vacuum, you're right.
Since he came back in 2002, they fucking wrestled each other a million fucking times. They wrestled at that SummerSlam. They wrestle in the Elimination Chamber at Survivor Series that year. They have a 2 out of 3 fall match on the next pay-per-view, Armageddon 2002, that is 3 fucking stipulation matches. They have a last man standing match at Rumble 2004. They're in 2 3-ways at Mania and Backlash. Now they're doing Hell in the Cell. It was so fucking played out.
Right. Yeah.
And they're both
it's funny. They say that they're going to do the Hell in the Cell. Like this is it. This is the one that's going to end it. And I'm like, motherfucker, Shawn Michaels fell from the top of a ladder through a stack of tables at Armageddon. Like,
yes.
That didn't end it?
Yes.
And you're right, Mike. You're right. They both worked their asses off, and both dudes got awesome color in that match, both of them. And what was funny was Triple H goes for it first, right? And it's not that great. And then Shawn Michaels gets his color and he fucking rips it, right? And he's gushing. And I was like, yes, let's fucking go, Shawn Michaels.
Yes.
And then
John was always a really good leader.
In front of Triple H, right? Well, then Triple H is like, well, if he's going to do that, I'm going for it again. And then the second time Triple H goes for that shit, holy fuck, is he bleeding everywhere. And I thought it was awesome. And that is, again, something you'll never see in WWE again is 2 guys bleeding that level in a match like that. But I think it brings so much more drama to a match.
It does. And it worked.
That's why those contexts of like, because you can't even really call that deathmatch wrestling.
Right.
But that's the type of hardcore wrestling that I like. Like that match, the match at Backlash with Orton and Mick Foley, where I'm emotionally invested in the story.
Right.
So I'm gonna watch the death match because I want to see these two tear into each other. I don't like deathmatch wrestling in the sense that here's a card, all the matches are death matches, and there's no story behind any of them. They're just going to go in there and put each other and wrap them in barbed wire. That just never got me.
Yeah.
Right.
I get it. I totally understand. And good deathmatch wrestling isn't that lazy, right? The best guys, Nick Gage, for instance, go in there and tell a story, and they can tell a story, and they do it differently. And I know we're getting off track here, because Triple H, you're right, at this point is all over everything, and he's being pushed everywhere. And I think you're right. There was probably a lot of exhaustion, but I really loved the work, and the near falls in this match were really good. And these guys beat the fuck out of each other. And there's a point at the end of the match, near the end of the match, where Michaels pushes Triple H back and hits him with a super kick that is one of the stiffest super kicks I think Michaels has ever fucking thrown. And I think it was just because he was too close, but he fucking pops him one right there at the end of in that go home stretch. He really fucking lights Triple H up with a good sweet chin music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good. It's just long.
Yeah,
it is. It's good. It's just
I remember watching it as a fan, I couldn't believe that Hunter won. And looking at it now, like, okay, well, the next night Kane attacks Shawn Michaels, and then Michaels is gone for 4 months. Mm-hmm. So I get why it was Hunter that went over, but at the same point in time, it's like a lot of people used that as like, oh, Hunter is not gonna do business with anybody, yada yada. Hunter sold like a motherfucker for everybody. He might have been cramming himself.
A bad rap about that,
he might have been cramming himself down everybody's throat in the sense that he was always going to be featured. But that motherfucker put more people over and got more people up to that next level than anybody else.
There's a Raw in 2000 where he believably made the crowd think that Taka Michinoku was going to beat him for the world heavyweight title.
Yeah.
Like Taka gets a near fall on him, and Triple H sold the move and everything so well that, I mean, the crowd was going fucking crazy thinking that he was about to win the world title. He's really good at that. It's just that's the thing too. That's another thing that, again, we're in a vacuum. He wrestled Kevin Nash the year before this in a Hell in the Cell. Like he's all over with everybody, and I think that hurt his crowd response. But I mean, as far as like in the ring, he's very giving in the ring. I don't think anybody can argue that.
And there's a lot of instances in his career, much like the booking of this match, where he goes at a feud ends, and the guy he's feuding against is going away, so he gets the win, or there's some other plans. I think of also his match with Sting so many years later, right? Like everybody looked at that and went, why didn't Sting win that match? It was so obvious. Just put him over. It was the right thing to do. But then you realize they were going to book Triple H versus The Rock the next year, but that fell apart. So we never knew that. So then they didn't want Triple H to lose in that spot and then be in the main event the next year. It's just some of those weird booking things that we weren't aware of as fans that led to him winning.
Yeah. Well, and it ended up looking weird too because we didn't get Hunter and The Rock that year. But then when they finally brought Sting back, he was wrestling Seth Rollins for the world title. So I was like, wait a minute.
That's
this
WWE
guy lost his only match on WWE TV, and now he's wrestling your world champion?
Yeah, that's because you're a legend. That's WWE booking. That's why Goldberg can still come in today and be the number one contender. So, all right, guys, shifting gears here so that we can get in this match because we got 10 minutes, and we may skip a little of the middle of this match. But this is Michael V's segment of the show where he picks a random match from his archives or something that he knows.
Hold on. Let's go back. Let's go back for a second. What's your guys' favorite match from the pay-per-view?
Oh, okay. Overall, my favorite match was probably the main event. Even though it was 46 minutes long, I enjoyed it the most because I like blood and there was some really good near falls.
I think it was Benoit and Kane. I really don't like Kane he could be hit or miss with me, especially character-wise, because they'll do so much goofy shit with him. But his work, yeah, it's the same. I get what you're saying there, but it's also pretty fucking solid. And Benoit, is Benoit outside of the obvious negative connotations of Benoit there. But I mean, in the ring, I thought it was pretty fucking good.
Sure.
Look, when Okay, so Benoit's chops on Kane and Kane's uppercuts on Benoit.
Yeah.
Like, they were like knocking the fuck out of each other. And
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, that match is 18 minutes. Benoit took an ass beating, but still kept himself alive.
Yeah.
I liked the main event, but I felt like I was sitting on my thumbs waiting for it to start.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can understand. And for me,
Because
it
it
was
was
probably a
so
different
long.
viewing experience because you guys watched the build-up and I watched it in a vacuum. So I watched it in a very different experience than you guys probably did. Because at that point, you're like the crowd. You're over that whole idea. But me, I looked at it different because I wasn't paying attention to
the build-up for Kane. The build-up for Kane was horrible. He's essentially fucking sexually assaulting Lita every week, and trying to force himself on it. Yeah, it's like, and he's like, this is when he's like screaming out of his mind, doing promos, talking into the camera with, like where he's talking to himself. The build-up was not really that good, but I just thought the match itself. And,
the build-up was terrible because he became #1 contender by default. That battle royal came down to him and Hunter, and Shawn eliminated Hunter. So him becoming the #1 contender was the byproduct of them pushing Shawn and Hunter into the cell.
And he's really, he's really feuding. Yeah, he's really feuding with Matt Hardy at this point. I mean, Benoit.
Yeah, legit. Like the extent of them building him up for Benoit was him joining that handicap match the week before on Raw and pinning him.
Interesting.
That was the extent. So Kane pinned Benoit in a handicap match after Benoit already wrestled in one handicap match. So make him look weak as shit. Yeah. So
all right, so Michael, so your favorite match was also Benoit?
Yeah, I got to go with Benoit and Kane.
Gotcha. All right, Michael, take us in a time machine. Take us back to 1984. You are one of the smartest people when it comes to the history of professional wrestling I know. Tell us if you can a little bit of set this up for us. Memphis, 1984. Rock and Roll Express taking on Lanny Poffo and Randy Savage. Like, what's the context here?
This is tremendous shit. This is, well, I'll give you an abbreviated version, but Savage's dad, Angelo Poffo, had a ICW, which was an complete outlaw territory in Tennessee. And there was, I mean, they finally ended up working together. And when they did, Savage is so hot here. But I mean, when you talk about, like territorial wars, this was like an actual war with guns and things like that. Like
with guns.
Oh, yeah, there is.
Legitimate,
Randy Savage, he pistol whips Bill Dundee at one point, like legit in real life. So, yeah, it goes. No, I'm sorry. I believe it's Dundee who got him. But Savage comes in. He's a red hot heel. Everybody kind of knows about ICW and some of the stuff there. Yeah, the Rock and Roll Express are babyface tag team here.
It's an invasion angle before invasion angles, kind of.
Yeah. It's kind of, and Savage, when he eventually turns babyface, is mega over. I mean, the thing, Ben and I were kind of starting to talk about this before the show started. Savage in Memphis is so much better than Savage in WWF because WWF is good for, I mean, it's just two different styles, but Memphis is a place for unhinged people and WWF 1980s is not, and Randy Savage is completely fucking unhinged.
Daddy, where's my bubble gum?
So we have Angelo Poffo is in the corner of his sons, and on the other side is the Rock and Roll Express. And now, when you talk about the Rock and Roll Express,
I'll be down in a little bit.
You're really talking about the prototype babyface underdog tag team, and you could trace it back. You have the Rock and Roll Express, and without the Rock and Roll Express, Vern Gagne's probably not putting Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels together and creating the Midnight Rockers in AWA.
Mm-hmm.
They take that same gimmick, that same style, the good-looking babyface underdog tag team. They take that on. That leads to I guess there's a kind of a gap, but I would say it leads to the Hardys, right? The Hardys, kind of the same gimmick, right? The brothers, good-looking guys, underdogs. They're not the bodybuilders, right? Which leads to the Young Bucks. So you can really draw almost a parallel from the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks don't exist, is what I'm saying, if the Rock and Roll Express don't exist. They are the blueprint for what babyface tag team wrestling is. No,
because where did the Hardys grow? Where did the Hardys grow up?
In North Carolina, heart of fucking rock and roll.
Jim Crockett Promotions, and you know, and they'll tell you. I mean, they were huge Rock and Roll Express fans who are still fucking working to this day.
Amazing, right? So
yeah, they were on one of the Heroes and Legends shows that I was on, and Robert. I admittedly I haven't watched a lot of Rock and Roll Express matches because I haven't watched a lot of old NWA Crockett Promotion stuff, which I plan on doing when I'm done with 2004. I'm going back and I'm watching 1988 WWE and WCW, but they were on Heroes and Legends a couple of years ago, and Robert Gibson and Ricky Morton are two of the coolest motherfuckers I have ever met in my entire life, and they're just so open. Like, I'm just walking in the crowd and Robert Gibson just comes up to me and he's like, "Want to see something cool, kid?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And for the next 15 minutes, he's just grabbing me and showing me different ways to fuck with people in the ring if they don't want to work.
That's great.
And
right?
at first, it's just me and him. And then one guy is kind of walking by and he stops and he's watching. And by the time we're done, there is a crowd of people around us. And me and Gibson are just standing in the center. And he's just spinning me around, showing me all sorts of different shit.
This is amazing. You're watching it. We're watching this as you're telling the story. And they start red hot. They start right out of the gates red hot.
Can you tilt that down a little bit, Ben?
Tilt that. What do you mean? What do you mean as far as?
So all I can see are their heads right now.
Really?
I don't know if it's like my.
I see it.
Is that better? Worse?
I see all of it.
What the hell? Is it just my freaking screen?
It might be.
Make the screen full. It could be.
I made it full and it's like, hold on. Keep it on. Hold on. I'm trying to do what I can do.
So yeah, but yeah, Ricky and Robert. Like, it's funny. I have a Ricky and Robert story. So when Vito and I were working on the cartoon, we had an idea to have Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson be the voices of the main characters. They were, because the idea was they were a former tag team. They had broken up, and we thought, wouldn't it be funny if this broken up tag team would be the Rock and Roll Express, who had never broken up ever, right? And so we talked to them for a while. Ricky Morton was very cool. He was all about it. He was all in. And we had a video call with Robert Gibson, and Robert Gibson couldn't be less interested in doing a cartoon voice. If there wasn't an amount of money we could have paid Robert Gibson, I don't think, to have been interested in the cartoon.
Well, he's getting a little bit older now. When you get a little bit older, you got to be more selective of like things you leave the house for.
So here we see Lanny Poffo, and this is an opportunity for me to kind of put over Lanny Poffo. I like Lanny Poffo. Yeah. For what he was never going to be a superstar, but as his stuff as a jobber on WWF television in like 1986, he's all over their television. He's on television every week.
Yeah, his only problem in WWF is that his size, like Vince just saw him, you know, he was only going to be seen as a certain way, but correct. I mean, he's really fucking good.
He's really good. He moves differently than anybody in the business ever, I think. He's got a very unique movement about himself.
Even the way he just skinned the cat right there is a good example of that too. Like he
moves with a femininity, a male femininity that not a lot of guys are confident enough to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's like a certain grace. Like he's really good like that.
And I always say this about Lanny Poffo because I started watching when WWE Network put out the Wrestling Challenge starting in 1986. They put out like 4 years in a row of it, right? So I started watching right at the beginning. And Lanny Poffo, I'd said it before, is all over their television. Like, he's literally on every week. So then they start making LJNs, right? They start making LJN figures of everybody. And to this day baffles me. There is no reason Lanny Poffo did not have a LJN, but Ted Arcidi did. There's no way it makes sense that Arcidi had an LJN or SD Jones had an LJN, but Lanny Poffo. If you go by their television, I'm saying because they obviously liked him because they put him on television every week.
No, but Vince only hired Ted Arcidi to make a fucking doll of Ted Arcidi. Like that's like Vince's like prototypical doll type. his fucking Ted Arcidi, but poor Lanny.
It's a great figure too, by the way. It is a really cool looking figure, but it never made sense to me. Like Lanny Poffo just deserved more than what he got in that first WWE run. Now as the Genius, that's a whole different thing. But.
I don't want to segue into something too dark or weird, but it should be mentioned that this match has two men with what are reportedly enormous penises. Robert Gibson and Lanny Poffo here. You have heard what Lanny Poffo can do to himself, correct?
The rumor is, right, he could tie his dick in a knot.
The rumor is that he can suck his own dick and that he has done so in the locker room before. So that's pretty funny.
Shit.
Yeah, that's pretty funny about Lanny Poffo. Now, Robert Gibson, there's also been talks about that Robert Gibson. Ricky Morton said it. This is a funny Ricky Morton quote. So Ricky Morton said about Robert Gibson, most guys see a pretty girl, they walk on over, they stick it in. Robert sees a girl and he sticks it in and then walks on over.
I can't imagine. Could you imagine? You're in a locker room, Nick, in 2021, and some guy's like, "Watch this! I could suck my own dick." And in the middle of the locker room, he's just gets down on the ground and starts sucking his own dick.
Yes.
And here's the thing: like, I'm not gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But
still,
I feel like I would look like what?
For the story alone,
that's
you have to be like, just so I can say I've seen it. I have
no, and let me say this. Let me say this in Nick's defense right now too. If you are listening to this and you think, man, that's so fucking weird that he would look, I promise you that no less than 95% of every fucking wrestling locker room in the country, in the history of the fucking world, would fucking watch that same thing. Maybe one person's raised like Pentecostal and they're like, oh no, I can't do that. But everybody else in the business would for sure.
Because we're all demented in that way, right? Where we're okay because we want to see that kind of demented shit.
Yeah, it's not a sex thing. It's like, wait, you could do what? Oh shit, I gotta see this. Are you fucking serious? And you're not gonna sit there and watch it forever, but you're gonna sit there and see if you can.
You guys ever watch that Zach and Miri make a porno?
Yes.
It goes right back to that. When Seth Rogen's like, people like watching other people fuck. If someone told me that they had a video of Rosie O'Donnell getting fucked stupid, I'd be like, that is so disgusting. Why aren't we watching that right now?
Right, yeah.
It's true. Yeah. It is true.
Yeah, celebrity sex tapes are horrible and like leaking them is awful. But like human nature says you have to look and see. You have to see what it's all about.
Yep.
This is a tremendous match.
Which I'm glad we kind of got away from that. It seemed like for a while, every other week, like people were like, "Oh, sex tape of so and so and dudes of so and so." I'm glad it seems like the human race has moved on from being pieces of shit like that.
Yeah, for sure. I don't love the non-matching gear from Poffo and Savage, but I get it because they're not really a tag team. But it's just one of those things. Like tag teams should always have matching gear. That's one of my bugaboos.
Yeah, Randy's. I mean, no offense to Landon, we talked about he's really good, but he's not a star. But Randy's kind of slumming it with his brother here.
Sure, it would be incumbent on Lanny to make sure he's matching Savage, right? Like Savage isn't matching Lanny. I'm saying Lanny, come on, man, don't you have some yellow trunks?
Get your shit together. Yes.
Randy probably said something to him in the back too, like, couldn't get matching gear, could you?
Nick, you were away for a second. We were talking about the way Lanny Poffo moves in the ring is so unique.
Oh yeah,
and I said there's kind of a femininity to the way that he moves. But
he reminds me of Rick Martel.
Oh my god, a fucking a senton in 1984.
In 1984, who else is doing that? Nobody but Lanny Poffo, ladies and gentlemen. Lanny Poffo is really an originator of top rope moves like that. He really was doing them before a lot of other people.
And it's funny too, because so Savage. Savage.
Whoa!
See, there you go.
That dip looked nasty.
Over the top. That's a disqualification. I think we have a disqualification.
Savage is not.
Yeah.
Well, you know
DQ.
Well, there's
that's a lot of that
happening. Top rope DQ. Wow. And that looked nasty too.
Well, yeah, if you're gonna do a DQ over the top, that's the bump to take to do it. But this is I I don't want to lose to your guys, and you're not beating our guys, so let's just not do a finish. Here we go.
Oh,
Yeah,
look at this.
I would take a pile driver from Randy Savage.
On a table?
Oh,
wow. That table was not gimmicked in any way, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Oh, no, it is not. It's Randy Savage.
No, is he setting it back up?
The remnants.
Oh.
Look at that. Back in the old school, they fade out, right? They pull out because you don't want to see the violence.
Man. Fuck, I missed this.
Angelo out there throwing blows.
I'm pretty excited. Now that I'm done watching Bad Blood, I'm getting ready to start my annual November tradition of purging on Survivor Series. And I'm going to watch one of the ones from the 80s today. Yeah.
I just watched 87 the other day.
Survivor Series is my favorite, so you better pick a good one. It better be one of the early ones when they actually have real teams and not any of these bullshit late ones where they just throw one Survivor Series match.
Oh no, we're definitely going to watch one that's all Survivor Series. It's I can tell you right now, it's going to be 87, 88, 89, or 90. It's going to be one of those four.
Perfect.
So,
well, fellas, an hour and 25 minutes. I think that was as clean as we could have done it, and it was a fun time. What do you guys think?
Absolutely.
So we'll do it again next Sunday, where we will be reviewing a Survivor Series, and then we will be watching a match of Michael V's choosing. Until then, this is Ben Jordan from Michael V and Nick Cutler, and this is the Now and Then Wrestling